Tuesday Drive.
Now, earlier in today's program, I was asking the question whether you've tried bush tucker, and if you have, is there a particularly favourite ingredient that you like to cook with? Now, if you're someone who's seen the benefits in our native ingredients, you're not alone. There's quite an appetite for them here and also overseas. Joining me this afternoon is reporter Clare Watson, who's been looking into this and written an article for Australian Geographic. Hello and welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Stephen.
Now, why has our First Nations people's food become so popular?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I guess what I discovered in researching this article for Australian Geographic is that it has been popular for quite some time. This is not something that's new. It's had some booms in popularity over the past few decades. And sometimes that might be celebrity chefs that come to Australia and they're really interested about native ingredients that grow here. But I think more recently what's driving this new interest in the bush tucker food industry is people who consumers, that are interested in where their food comes from. And that might be for a variety of reasons, but they're starting to ask questions about what food might grow in their local area, and that's where the traditional owners, Aboriginal people across the country, have so much to offer in terms of sharing their stories about the wonderful food that grows here.
And that was one of the beautiful things I took out of the article, was the fact that A, people want to know where their food is coming from, but B, with our traditional owners, they've actually got a story behind these ingredients too.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of deep, rich history, obviously, around these native ingredients, because we're not just talking about snack food here, but actually a whole cuisine of food that has sustained Aboriginal people for millennia. And in terms of marketing products, that story is really valuable and it's quite appealing to people. And so what needs to happen here, I suppose, is a greater recognition and value for those stories and those cultural practices that Aboriginal people have to offer in sharing their food and their traditional knowledge with us.
When it comes to certain ingredients, what are some of the popular ones overseas?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a number of ingredients, I suppose, that have sprung forth. Things like lemon myrtle and finger limes. But one of the most in-demand bush foods would be the kakadu plum. And this plant, just by way of adapting to the harsh conditions here in Australia, has some amazing properties in that it has the highest vitamin C content of any fruit in the world. It's also got some really potent antioxidants in the fruit. And as well, it can be used as a preservative in other foods. Not only that, kakadu plum can often be found in some cosmetics too. I was actually just noticing the other day that in my sunscreen, kakadu plum was listed on the ingredients, which would be, I would think, as a preservative. And so even if perhaps, listeners here aren't so familiar with the kakadu plum, which does grow across all of Northern Australia, we are seeing some great demand for this product, particularly overseas. And yeah, that comes back to, I suppose, the value that people do see in products like the kakadu plum that are traditionally wild harvested by Aboriginal communities across Northern Australia.
And did I read correctly that, I believe it was in China, that they're actually producing fake kakadu plum powder?
Well, there have been reports of that, and that's why Aboriginal communities across Northern Australia are really working hard to get control over the supply chain and come up with some strategies to be able to trace sources of kakadu plum back to the exact geographical locations where they came from. So what I'm referring to here is the Northern Australian Aboriginal Kakadu Plum Alliance, which is an alliance of Aboriginal communities who have been collaborating with some researchers to develop this technology that aids them in not only supplying their product to the world, but also making sure that that what consumers are buying is genuine.
So from what I understand, so our First Nations people, they obviously very, very proud of the food, and they would want more Australians to experience it. Is there any concern that we could, all of a sudden start overproducing or mass producing these products, which then, would benefit the consumer, but then, it could be a real hindrance to Aboriginal communities?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and you've kind of hit the nail on the head there as to some of the conflicts or tensions that are playing out among players in the bush foods industry. And that is that there can be sometimes some conflict between demand for products with the need to respect cultural practices around harvesting those products. And so in researching this article, I got to meet Daniel Motlop, who is based in Adelaide but is originally from Darwin, and he owns an Indigenous-owned supply company called Something Wild. And so Daniel sources native ingredients from a whole range of Aboriginal communities across the country and then supplies them to restaurants, but also sells them wholesale to the public. And he was telling me how, there can be these conflicts between consumers and people that would like to use these products, but he always has to respect the cultural practices of the people that he is working with. And to go back to the Kakadu plum, he sources Kakadu plums from a community in the Northern Territory, and sometimes the women who harvest those plums just say the trees need a rest, and that needs to be respected here.
That put such a smile on my face, that part of the article, and I was actually relaying that story to my partner as well about that particular Kakadu plant and the fact that the lady said, "Look, that's it. This tree needs to go to bed. Basically, it's had enough." And I thought that was beautiful, and I can see why that some of these items would be in such high demand.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite remarkable, and more than that, I suppose, is the rich traditional knowledge that accompanies each and every one of these native ingredients.
And just out of curiosity, have you tried any bush tucker yourself?
I did try a few ingredients down when I was in Adelaide visiting Daniel. He harvests from the local area some native greens, so succulents, things like kakala, which is a succulent, so it's very salty just from the ground that it grows in, and he turns those into pickles, but he also sells greens like that and samphire that the people can use as accompaniments to other meats and products that he sells at the store.
And are we taking the right step forward, Claire, with, I know we touched on this before, but, balancing between getting these products out onto the market and looking after the Aboriginal communities? Are we moving in the right direction?
From the people that I spoke to for this article, I think there are some really good movements in the right direction, as you say. I don't want to obviously speak for every Aboriginal community, but from what I did learn from speaking to Suzanne Thompson, who's the chair of the Australian Native Food and Botanicals group, is that really here, in some ways we need to slow down. There's so much demand for these products and the market is moving very fast, but first and foremost, suppliers and consumers at any stage along that food supply chain need to form strong relationships that can be the grounds for an ethical industry with benefit sharing back to communities. And we are seeing people like Daniel at Something for Wild working with governments and other bodies to ensure that those legal frameworks or policies are in place. But it's something that I think everyone who has an interest in or engages with this industry needs to be aware of and actively support.
Well, Claire, I know you're on a deadline, so I really do appreciate you taking time out of your day to have a chat with us on Triple UFM. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. I hope you enjoyed it.
That was Clare Watson, a reporter for the Australian Geographic. And if you'd like to find out more, you can actually catch the article that is in the current magazine. And as I said just through that chat before, I've actually had a chance to read it. And I was intrigued at how good desert soil is for growing plants. Fascinating, actually, and just this concept that there could be almost like a sea of green in an area where you would least expect it. It is 19 minutes to 6. This is Tuesday Drive.
This is Tuesday Drive.